Welcome to the Hot News Channel, where we strip away the noise to analyze today's breaking stories. It is January 31st, 2026.
And if you're feeling a sense of vertigo today, you are absolutely not alone. We are looking at a date that historians might very well circle in red ink.
It feels that way.
We're seeing a convergence of domestic unrest, international brinksmanship that, frankly, borders on madness and information leaks that are shaking the very foundations of the political elite.
It is a lot to take in. Honestly, today isn't just a busy news day. It feels like a perfect storm of distraction and escalation. I was looking at the feeds this morning, and it's like living in a split-screen reality. On one side, the world is watching a massive, an unprecedented data dump regarding the Jeffrey Epstein files. We're talking millions of pages.
Right.
On the other side, the U.S. military is positioning a historic armada off the coast of Iran. And perhaps most terrifyingly, right here at home, American citizens are being detained and killed by federal agents on domestic soil.
It is the definition of a polycrisis. But if we want to understand what is actually happening, what the hidden truth is, we have to look past the individual headlines. This is a crisis of control.
Control? How so?
Well, the administration is currently fighting on three distinct fronts. You have the geopolitical front in the Middle East, the physical front on the streets of Minneapolis, and, the psychological front in the court of public opinion.
Okay.
And the key takeaway for today, the thing you have to understand, is that the connection between these events is not a coincidence. It is a strategy. It's a strategy of chaos.
Okay, let's unpack this because the stakes just couldn't be higher. We have to start with the most immediate threat to global stability, which is this situation with Iran.
Absolutely.
We have reports coming in, specifically analysis from Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, and we also have Donald Trump's own post on Truth Social painting, a very specific, very alarming picture.
It's the rhetoric of war, but not just war. It's the rhetoric of annihilation.
Exactly. I want to read part of this post because the specific language here really matters. Trump posted that a massive armada is heading to Iran. His words were that it is bigger than what we had in Venezuela.
Bigger than Venezuela. That is a very specific comparison.
It is. And he's citing Operation Midnight Hammer from last June as a sort of precedent. Now, for you listening, you might have forgotten the details in the news cycle. So can we just pause on Operation Midnight Hammer? What exactly was that?
It's crucial context. You have to understand Midnight Hammer to understand how much they're escalating now. That operation was a limited tactical strike. It was carried out last June.
Right.
It involved about 125 aircraft. We're talking mostly F-35s and the new B-21 Raiders. And they were targeting 3 specific nuclear enrichment facilities inside Iran. It was surgically precise.
Oh, in and out.
In and out. It was designed to send a message without triggering a full-scale ground war. The administration touted it as a huge success because they hit the centrifuges, they set the program back, and that was that.
Right, I remember that. It was the slap on the wrist that was supposed to end the whole conversation.
Precisely. But here is the problem, and this is what's so dangerous. Trump is now using that surgical strike as the benchmark for this new armada. He's implying that what is coming now makes Midnight Hammer look like a training exercise. When you start comparing a naval deployment to a Venezuela-style blockade or buildup, you aren't talking about hitting a few bunkers anymore. You're talking about regime survival. You are talking about total war.
And this is where the logic just starts to fracture for me. The messaging is, it's all over the place. Trump says this buildup is happening because, and I'm quoting him here, Iran wants to make a deal.
Right.
But in the same breath, literally the same post, he is threatening them with total destruction for allegedly executing 837 people.
This is where we need to deconstruct the messaging because it is just riddled with contradictions.
Yeah.
Think about it from a negotiator's perspective for a second.
You have a president claiming that the adversary is desperate to come to the table. They want a deal, he says. Okay, if they want a deal, why are you sending the largest armada in modern history to their doorstep?
It makes no sense.
Usually you send the armada to force them to the table. If they're already there, the armada is redundant. It's an act of aggression that could blow up the very deal you claim they want.
It feels like he's trying to have it both ways. He wants to be seen as the deal maker, I'm the only one who can do it, but also as the conqueror.
Exactly. And then you have this very specific number, 807 executions. Where does that come from? Trump cites it as a hard fact, but Iran's top prosecutor has vehemently disputed this, calling it a pure fabrication.
So we don't even know if it's true.
Well, we know the Iranian regime is brutal. Absolutely. No one is defending them. But 837 executions in a short window. That is a specific, verifiable statistic. By anchoring the military threat to this disputed number, Trump is creating a very confusing red line.
That is the exact breakdown of logic that Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis highlighted in his latest report. He says the administration has moved the goalpost so many times.
So many times.
First, it was about the nuclear deal stopping the bomb. Then, remember, it was about protecting the protesters in Tehran. Now it's about these alleged hangings. It leaves us asking, what is the actual goal here? What is the objective?
Is it regime change?
Right. Is it a new treaty? Or is it just a massive show of force for domestic consumption to look tough?
And that ambiguity is the most dangerous part. Because when you deploy that level of firepower without a clear political objective, you are inviting catastrophe. History tells us that wars often start not because one side wants them, but because signals get crossed.
And the military reality here, we should talk about that. We're hearing all this tough talk about regime change, but the analysts we trust, people like Larry Johnson and Alistair Crook, they are waving massive red flags.
They're basically screaming that this is a fantasy.
I want to drill down on Larry Johnson's analysis. He's a former CIA analyst. He knows logistics. And he made a comparison to the 2003 Iraq invasion that really stuck with me.
I think I know the one you mean.
He said that the buildup for Iraq took 8 months. 8 months of moving tanks, supplies, hundreds of thousands of troops into Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. It was a massive undertaking. What we are seeing now is air and sea power only.
Right, and that is a critical distinction that the public needs to understand. You can bomb a country from the sea, you can flatten infrastructure from the air, but you cannot occupy a country like Iran, which is mountainous, populous, and huge, without boots on the ground.
We don't have them there.
Larry Johnson's point is that the U.S. lacks the logistical footprint right now for an invasion. We don't have the 300,000 troops sitting on the border ready to go. So the idea of a full-scale invasion is, for now, off the table.
So if we aren't invading, then the plan must be just to break things, to bomb them back to the Stone Age, so to speak.
That leads us to the decapitation strike fallacy. And this is a belief that is very popular in certain circles in Washington, pushed by people who have clearly never studied Iranian defense doctrine.
The idea that you could just cut off the head of the snake?
Precisely. Kill the supreme leader, blow up the IRGC headquarters in Tehran, and the body will die. The people will magically rise up, throw flowers, and democracy will bloom overnight.
Alistair Crook had a very different take on that. He called it a dangerous fantasy.
A profoundly dangerous fantasy. Alistair Crook, who has decades of experience in intelligence and diplomacy in that region, he notes that Iran doesn't operate like a top-down Western military anymore.
They learned from our past wars.
They watched what we did to Saddam Hussein. They watched what we did to Gaddafi in Libya. They learned. They have shifted to a completely decentralized defense system. He says they have missiles buried in silos across 57 different districts.
57 districts. Let's just pause on that number. What does that mean practically? If you're the Pentagon, what does that number tell you?
It means there is no single off switch. It means there is no silver bullet. If the U.S. Navy launches a massive volley of Tomahawk missiles and takes out the command and control center in Tehran, the commander in District 12 doesn't stop fighting.
He doesn't need to wait for a phone call.
He doesn't need a phone call from the capital to launch his missiles. He has Cree-delegated authority. He has his own target list. He knows exactly what to hit: a U.S. base in Iraq, a tanker in the Gulf, a facility in Saudi Arabia.
So you strike the head, and 57 other heads bite you.
Exactly. And more importantly, Crook notes that they have pre-appointed successors for all commanders. If a general is killed in the first wave, the next man is already designated and knows exactly what to do. The command structure is built to survive a decapitation strike.
It sounds incredibly resilient.
It is. So a quick strike by this armada won't topple the regime. It will trigger a massive regional war where the decision-making is dispersed across the entire country. You are fighting a swarm, not a snake.
And yet, looking at the news, you wouldn't know any of this. We are already seeing the media machinery ramping up to justify this potential attack.
The manufacturing of consent.
I was looking at a report from Middle East Eye featuring Mohammed Morandi, and he is warning that Western media is essentially doing the same thing they did before Iraq. They are using these unverified human rights claims, like those 837 execution numbers, to build a moral case for intervention.
It feels eerily similar to the lead up to Iraq and Libya, doesn't it? The humanitarian intervention narrative.
Because it does.
We have to go in to save the people.
Yeah.
But Morani's point is that this narrative is being constructed to bypass the logical questions. If you focus everyone's attention on the horror of the alleged executions, you stop them from asking about the feasibility of the war or the consequences of the attack.
And the consequences are terrifying. We aren't just talking about a regional war. We are talking about the entire global economy.
We are talking about the Strait of Hormuz. This is the choke point for a huge percentage of the world's oil supply.
Everything passes through there.
Everything. And if the U.S. attacks, Iran has the capability, and they have threatened this explicitly for years, to mine that strait. They have thousands of speedboats, they have drones, they have anti-ship missiles tucked away in caves all along that coastline.
They could shut it.
If they shut down the Strait of Hormuz, oil prices don't just go up, they double or triple overnight.
Which would trigger a global depression instantly.
Instantly, no question. So the hot news angle here, the one we really need to drive home for you, is that the U.S. is risking World War III and a global economic collapse for an objective that hasn't even been clearly defined. Is it worth destroying the global economy to send a message about an execution number that might not even be real?
That is the question the administration refuses to answer. And while that massive escalation is happening abroad, the situation at home is arguably just as volatile.
It really is.
We need to shift to the domestic front, specifically Minneapolis. You'd think with a war brewing, the government would want stability at home. But the reports coming out of Minneapolis from independent sources like Breaking Points and David Pakman are painting a picture of a city under siege.
Siege is the right word, and it's not being conducted by a foreign army, it's being conducted by our own federal agencies.
We have confirmation now that 2 U.S. citizens have been shot dead by federal immigration agents. I want to say their names because they're getting buried in all this noise. Renee Nicole Good, a mother of 3, and Alex Prey, an ICU nurse.
An ICU nurse.
These aren't cartel members. These aren't fugitives. These are everyday American citizens killed on American streets by federal agents.
This marks a fundamental shift in the nature of federal law enforcement in this country. We have to look at the mandate of IC immigration and customs enforcement. Their historical purview has been border enforcement and specific targeted deportations of non-citizens.
Right, at the border, or specific cases.
Exactly. What we are seeing in Minneapolis is a transition to what can only be described as interior occupation.
What does that look like on the ground? What does interior occupation mean?
It looks like federal agents in tactical gear patrolling American neighborhoods hundreds of miles from any border. It looks like shoot-first rules of engagement against U.S. citizens. When ICE is operating this aggressively in a northern city, engaging citizens like an ICU nurse with lethal force, they're acting less like a law enforcement agency and more like a federal police force sent to quell dissent.
They're treating American cities like occupied territory.
It's the only way to describe it.
And the imagery that is coming out, it's just horrific. There is footage circulating. We can't broadcast it, obviously, but it's been described in detail by our sources of a 5-year-old boy being detained by ICE.
It's hard to even comprehend.
Just imagine that for a second. A kindergartner in handcuffs or zip ties being led away by armed federal agents.
It's the kind of image that breaks a society. It destroys the social contract between the government and the people.
And the administration's response to this was almost as disturbing as the event itself. J.D. Vance came out and claimed he had investigated this personally. He tried to spin it.
He did. He tried to suggest there was a reason for it.
But subsequent reports just blew that apart. It turns out the boy's mother was actually home while the father was arrested, yet they took the child anyway. They separated a 5-year-old from his mother, who was standing right there. Why? Why would you do that?
It creates a climate of terror. That is the only logical explanation. There's no procedural reason. If you take the child when the mother is present, it's not about procedure, it's about punishment. It's about sending a signal to that community that no one is safe, not even the children.
And this brings us to the next front of this war, the war on journalism.
Which is how the administration is handling the coverage of this terror.
This was the breaking news that really set the tone for the entire weekend. We have reports from Brian Tyler Cohen and Michael Wolff regarding the arrest of Don Lemon. Now, Don Lemon is a household name. He's a major journalist.
Right, not some small-time blogger.
And he was in Los Angeles, covering the Grammys, seemingly doing the celebrity circuit. But the arrest wasn't about the Grammys. It's directly related to his reporting in Minneapolis.
Can you connect those dots for us? Because Arresting a major journalist for their work is a huge, huge step.
The charge is conspiracy to deprive rights. His lawyer, Abby Lowell, is calling this a direct attack on the First Amendment. He's arguing that Don Lemon was doing standard reporting. He was covering a protest at a church, and the Department of Justice is twisting that into a criminal conspiracy.
So they're saying that by reporting on it, he was part of it.
Essentially, yes. They are arguing that by filming the protest and interviewing the organizers, he was conspiring with them to deprive someone else of their rights. It's a legal theory that can be used to arrest any journalist covering any protest.
This is a classic authoritarian tactic, but it's also a sign of profound weakness. I want to reference the analysis by historians Heather Cox Richardson and Dr. Joanne Freeman here. They look at the long history of American democracy, and they argue that a strong regime controls the narrative through persuasion or through results. If you are winning, if the country is doing well, you don't need to arrest the guy holding the microphone.
Right. If the economy is good and the war is popular, let them talk. Who cares?
Exactly. A weak regime arrests the storytellers. Arresting a high-profile figure like Don Lemon, specifically for doing his job, is an attempt to create a chilling effect. It's a warning shot to every independent journalist out there.
The message is what?
The message is, if we can touch him, if we can put Don Lemon in handcuffs for covering a protest, just imagine what we can do to you, the podcaster or the blogger, with no corporate lawyer.
It feels like shock and awe applied domestically. They want to force submission through sheer intimidation.
I would argue it's actually blundering bullying, and it's not working the way they think it is. Look at the international reaction. We have a report from Chris Norland analyzing South Korean news coverage. Now, South Korea is a close U.S. ally, but their media is looking at this and asking, is the U.S. becoming a dictatorship? The world is watching this, and they aren't seeing strength. They are seeing a regime that is terrified of its own people.
And by arresting Lemon and shooting citizens like Renee Nicole Good, they're not quelling the dissent.
They're creating martyrs. They're unifying the opposition. The protests aren't shrinking, are they?
No. Everything we're seeing suggests they're growing.
Exactly. Repression like this acts as an accelerant. It confirms every fear the protesters have, and it drives more people into the streets. It's having the opposite of the intended effect.
So you have the military escalation abroad, the domestic crackdown at home, and now the third leg of this stool. The distraction. We have to talk about the Epstein files.
The October surprise that came in January.
We've been waiting for this for years, and suddenly, boom, it drops today. On a Saturday. On the same day as the Armada launch and the Don Lemon arrest.
The timing is not accidental. In politics, at this level, there is no such thing as a coincidence of this magnitude.
We have analysis from Sabby Sabs, Tara Palmieri, and Alex Christoforou on this. Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, he announced the release of 3 million pages, 180,000 images, and 2,000 videos.
A mountain of data.
He is calling this the final dump. But, and this is huge, but
Right.
He also admitted the DOJ holds 6 million files total, so we are getting half the story, or less.
We are getting the curated half and releasing it on the exact same day as the Don Lemon arrest and the launch of the Iran Armada. That is a strategic flooding of the zone.
Explain that.
They are flooding the information ecosystem with so much data, so much salacious detail, that they hope the public won't be able to focus on the war or the domestic killings. It takes weeks, months to read 3 million pages. They want us, and you, burying our heads in flight logs while they position the aircraft carriers.
It's the ultimate look over here tactic.
It is a digital smokescreen.
But the content of these files, even if it is a distraction, we can't ignore it. Some of it is genuinely explosive. We have to talk about the specific revelations regarding the Trump orbit, because for years the narrative has been Trump kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago.
That has been the shield. I banned him. I was the one who saw he was no good.
Well, that shield is cracking. First, let's talk about Melania Trump. Emails have surfaced in this dump, revealing a genuinely friendly relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell.
Not just a formal one.
No, there's an email signed Love Melania that says, have a great time. This isn't a formal thank you for the donation note. This is personal. And Michael Wolff pointed out that Melania had previously threatened to sue him for even suggesting she was part of Epstein's social circle.
That destroys the I barely knew them defense. You don't sign emails Love Melania to casual acquaintances you suspect of being predators. It places the Trump family deeply inside that social matrix.
Then there is Elon Musk. For the longest time, Musk has played the I'm the anti-establishment guy card, fighting the powers that be.
Right, the renegade.
But an email surfaced where he is asking Jeffrey Epstein about a visit to his island. He writes, and I'm quoting, will be in the BVS Bart's area. Is there a good time to visit?
Again, the context matters so much. You don't ask a stranger if you can crash at their private Caribbean hideaway. That implies a level of familiarity and comfort that completely contradicts his public stance on all of this.
And then, of course, the big one, Donald Trump himself. This played out in real time on social media today. It was fascinating.
It was. You could almost see the panic happening behind the scenes.
Dr. Laura M. Whitfield flagged a sequence of events on Truth Social. Trump posted a denial, the standard one, claiming he banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago and had nothing to do with him.
The one we've heard a million times.
Exactly. But then, hours later, he deleted the post.
And that dilution is legally and psychologically significant. Why delete a standard denial? You usually leave that up as your flag in the ground.
Right.
You delete it if you realize it contradicts evidence that is about to come out. It suggests a consciousness of guilt, or at least a fear of being caught in a perjury trap by the very documents his own DOJ is releasing.
He might have realized, wait a second, there's a flight log or an email in those 3 million pages that proves I'm lying, and I just restated the lie.
It's the only logical conclusion, but there is another layer to this release that implies the DOJ might be helping him, or at least helping the powerful in general.
This is what Tara Palmieri pointed out.
Yes, the FBI tips issue. The files apparently contain thousands of pages of unverified accusations, random tips from the public sent to the FBI, mixed in with the real hard evidence like flight logs and emails.
So it's just a data dump of everything, junk and treasure, all mixed together.
This is the muddying the waters tactic. It is brilliant in a very sinister way. Imagine you have a box of real damning evidence. If you want to hide it, you don't burn it. That looks suspicious. Instead, you dump a truckload of garbage into the box.
So you mix wild, unverified, crazy accusations from random tip lines in with the real flight logs.
Precisely. So if you, as a journalist, find a flight log implicating a senator, they can just hold a press conference and say, oh, that's from the same file that had a tip about me being a lizard person. It's all junk.
It creates a boy who cried wolf scenario.
Exactly. It allows the powerful to dismiss the entire release as fake news or fanciful. It safeguards them by drowning the truth in noise. It makes the job of journalists like us nearly impossible because every single fact has to be painstakingly scrubbed against a mountain of intentional fiction.
It's weaponized confusion. Now, I want to zoom out a bit. We have covered the hot conflicts, Iran, Minneapolis, and the main distraction. But there is a Cold War brewing underneath all of this that is quietly reshaping the global map.
It's the bigger picture.
We have reports from Alexander Mercouris and Glenn Deason analyzing the situation in Ukraine. There's something called the energy truce.
Yes. There is apparently a fragile, unofficial ceasefire regarding energy infrastructure between Russia and Ukraine. No tax on the grids. On the surface, that sounds like good news. A step toward peace, maybe.
You would think so. But Mercouris points out the grim reality underneath it all. Despite this so-called truce, Ukraine is suffering massive blackouts. There was a technical failure with the Romanian and Moldovan grid connection.
So it wasn't a missile?
No. The infrastructure is just crumbling on its own. They don't need Russian missiles to turn off the lights anymore. The system is collapsing under the weight of years of war and neglect.
And this ties directly into the broader analysis provided by Professor John Mearsheimer. He argues we are fully in Cold War 2.0. The U.S. is trying to fight both Russia and China simultaneously, and it's stretching our resources and our credibility thin.
Mearsheimer's point is that the European and U.S. strategy in Ukraine has fundamentally failed.
Mearsheimer is looking at the chessboard. He argues that Russia views NATO in Ukraine as a true existential threat. They are not going to negotiate away the Donbass. They are not going to retreat because of a ceasefire. And these blackouts, they show that Ukraine is collapsing internally, regardless of what happens on the front line.
So the U.S., realizing this failure, is lashing out elsewhere.
Which brings us to Cuba. While Ukraine crumbles, the administration is turning its sights on our own hemisphere. Jimmy Dore had a report on Trump declaring a national emergency regarding Cuba.
He labeled it a failing nation and, get this, is imposing tariffs on any country that sells oil to Cuba.
This is the Monroe Doctrine on steroids. It is pure economic warfare, plain and simple. Think about what that actually means. If Mexico or Brazil wants to sell oil to Cuba to keep the lights on in Havana, the U.S. is threatening to sanction them.
It seems incredibly aggressive for a tiny island nation that poses zero military threat to the United States.
It is. But it parallels the domestic strategy we talked about earlier, using overwhelming force to crush anything that looks like defiance. But on a global scale, This is a disaster. It alienates the entire global south.
How so?
It tells every country in Latin America, Africa, and parts of Asia, if you trade with someone we don't like, we will crush your economy.
And what does that do? It pushes them right into the arms of the BRICS nations, China and Russia.
Precisely. It accelerates the move away from the U.S. dollar. If using the dollar means the U.S. gets to control your foreign and trade policy, then you find an alternative. You stop using the dollar. Trump thinks he is projecting strength, but he is actually isolating the United States and speeding up the end of its financial dominance.
And speaking of economic warfare, we have to talk about the tech front. This is the invisible war. The Mint report highlights a bipartisan group of U.S. lawmakers accusing NVIDIA, one of our biggest tech jewels, of powering the Chinese military.
Specifically through the DeepSeek AI model.
Right. So what does this mean?
This illustrates the absolute futility of our current tech containment strategy. The U.S. government is trying to draw a clear line in the sand. They are saying, this chip is for civilians, this chip is for the military. They want to ban exports of the high-end stuff to China.
But the lines are blurry, aren't they?
They aren't just blurry, they are gone. In China, and increasingly everywhere, there's a concept called military-civil fusion. The academic lab, the tech startup, and the military research center are all part of the same ecosystem. What's developed in one is used by the other.
And NVIDIA is a business.
They're a for-profit company. Their goal is to sell chips. The Mint report shows that despite the bans, despite the sanctions, the tech finds a way. The demand is too high and the profit is too great.
So we are trying to stop the tide with a spoon.
We are trying to blockade technology while our own companies are financially incentivized to sell to the biggest market in the world. You cannot sanction your way out of technological parity. China has DeepSeek. They have the advanced systems. The idea that we can keep them in the dark ages by signing a piece of paper in Washington is, frankly, delusional.
So we have physical wars, economic wars, tech wars. And that brings us to the final frontier, the information war. Who owns your reality? We have to talk about TikTok.
The sale is complete, and the mask is off.
According to Kim Iverson's report, TikTok US has been sold to a group led by Larry Ellison of Oracle. She describes Ellison as an ultra-Zionist. And the changes to the platform weren't gradual. They weren't subtle. They were immediate.
Immediate and drastic. This wasn't a corporate restructuring. This was an ideological purge of the platform.
Users are reporting they cannot DM the word Epstein. The word itself, it just doesn't go through. It gets flagged by the system. And the new CEO, Adam Presser, has implemented policies where accounts mentioning the word Zionist, even descriptively, even in a historical context, are being banned for hate speech.
This is the opening of what Jonathan Greenblatt of the ADL called the Eighth Front. Israel and its allies view the digital narrative as a legitimate theater of war. They felt they were losing the narrative with Gen Z on the old TikTok.
They saw the polling.
They saw that young people were increasingly sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, or at least critical of U.S. foreign policy in the region. So the strategy wasn't to win the argument through better ideas or debate.
It was to buy the megaphone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was a hostile takeover of the digital public square. By buying the platform, they can alter the algorithm, they can ban the words, and they can shape the reality that 150 million Americans see on their phones every single day.
But here is the million-dollar question. Is it working? Can you actually bottle up that much dissent? Kim Iverson also mentioned a mass exodus to a new app.
Up scrolled.
Yes. Founded by Issam Hijazi, it's suddenly the top free app in the store.
And that is the backfire effect. This is the lesson authoritarian regimes never seem to learn, whether it's in Tehran or in Washington. When you clamp down on a platform like TikTok, you don't kill the sentiment. You don't make Gen Z suddenly agree with U.S. foreign policy just because they can't post about it.
You just drive them underground or to a new platform.
You drive them to places you can't control. It mirrors the protests in the street we were just talking about. Repression breeds radicalization. By sanitizing TikTok, they are creating a digital underground in apps like Upscrolled that is going to be even more fervent and even harder for them to monitor. They are fracturing the internet, not fixing it.
So let's try to pull all of this together. It's a heavy day. We have the U.S. government projecting massive force abroad, the Iran Armada, the Cuba tariffs. Simultaneously, they're cracking down on their own citizens, Minneapolis, the Don Lemon arrest, and they are sanitizing the information flow, the TikTok sale, the confused Epstein dump. What is the through line here? If you had to summarize the State of the Union in one thought, what is it?
The hidden truth of January 31st, 2026 is that these are not acts of strength. They look like strength. An armada looks strong, arresting people look strong, but they are acts of desperation by a crumbling unipolar order.
Desperation is a strong word.
Absolute desperation. If you listen to a realist like Mearsheimer, if you listen to a historian like Heather Cox Richardson, they are saying the same thing from different angles. A confident power doesn't need to arrest journalists. A confident power doesn't need to threaten Armageddon over a negotiation table.
And it certainly doesn't need to rig the algorithm of a dancing app.
Exactly. The chaos we are seeing, the noise, the violence, the confusion, is the sound of the old order breaking. They feel they are losing control, and they are using maximum force on all fronts to try and claw it back.
It really does feel like we are watching the system fracture in real time, like the dam is finally breaking.
We are. Keith Edwards, in his report, mentioned the event of the century, referring to some memorial, but I think he missed the mark entirely. The real event of the century is this fragmentation of reality itself. If the news is censored, if the journalists are arrested, and if the official data is flooded with noise like the Epstein files, the final question for you, the listener, is this. How will you know when the war actually starts?
That is a terrifying thought to leave on. But it's the question we have to ask. If the screen goes dark or if the feed gets scrubbed, what is happening in the dark?
It is the only question that matters now.
The one thing to remember from this deep dive is this. Escalation is happening on all fronts. Military, legal, and digital. Do not trust the silence. Trust the noise of the protests and the leaks. That is where the real story is.
Absolutely. Stay vigilant.
If you found this analysis valuable, hit the plus or follow button on your podcast app and give us a like. Subscribe to the Hot News channel for more deep dives. Until we meet again, goodbye.